Good afternoon and welcome to our Business Agility video podcast. So each week we spend 30 minutes exploring business technology topics for small and medium-sized business owners in Canada. So our topic today is creating value and reducing waste in your business. So our panelists today are Samantha DeForge, myself, Murray QUIBELL, but we are highlighted today by our guest panelist, Stephen Young. And Stephen is an MBA, PMP, and he's currently working on his PhD. So we're certainly going to get into some of his topics related to his PhD in our podcast today. Stephen is the chair of the Alberta IoT Center of Excellence and is an organizational leader, change agent, and researcher and lecturer on leveraging Industry 4.0 technologies to deliver competitive business values. So we're going to get a little bit technical. We'll talk about the Internet of Things and maybe get into some of those. But one of the real strong perspectives Stephen will bring us is how do we actually evaluate the value in that to make sure that we're considering that before we're starting to drop technologies in. So our format is interactive and we invite questions from our webinar attendees and people through the webinar or through the Facebook live stream. So send questions in the chat box or on the Facebook, and we'll start with some panelist introductions and then get right into our topic. So with that, I'll quickly introduce myself. I'm Murray QUIBELL. I'm the president of Accurate Solutions. What we do every day is deliver streamlined solutions for business. So we love leveraging technology and making sure that it fits in the right frame of mind. So evaluating the value is exactly where we're all about, and we're excited to be joined by Stephen here. So I'll pass it over to you, Stephen, for a quick introduction. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. You know, I do get a little bit nervous when people say we're going to be technical, because I really, as much as I'm in a technical field and that's so important, I'm not a technical person. I'm not the guy coding the ones and zeros. But in terms of the business sense, it's about innovation, delivering on consumer needs and demand, and not just chasing shiny objects for the sake of chasing the shiny objects or squirrels. So what is the ROI? You hear these terms. What is the strategy to get into this whole umbrella of Industry 4.0 technologies? We've heard all these terms like Internet of Things, the worst acronym ever, IoT. And you got like blockchain, you got digital twin, and all these kind of things in the cloud. But how do you make sense of that as a small business and deliver value and at the end of the day create efficiency and reduce waste? So I'm excited to field any questions and explore this topic.
Awesome. And my name is Samantha NITON-DEFORGE, and I work with Accurate Solutions as the business solutions specialist. And I'm really excited to have Stephen here today because I think when it comes to applying technology in business, I think it's all safe to say that it needs to be a pragmatic solution that makes sense. It's like Stephen said, not just dropping, something pretty and shiny in. It's not about, dropping something in and walking away from it for 5 years. And there's so many different aspects that go into leveraging digital tools on a daily basis. So it's really about demystifying the acronyms that you spoke about, Stephen, like IoT. Like you said, it's a horrible acronym, Internet of Things. But how does someone in a mid-market or a small business use these tools, and really, how do we demystify that, right? So I think we're going to have a lot of great things to talk about here today. One of the biggest things I think we should all start with is organizational change, and how there is such a significant demand at this point in time to do this. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I think we're at a unique point in history where, Industry 4.0, there was a 1.0, there was a 2.0, and we're at a 3.0. We're not talking about steam engines. We're not talking about digital. We're talking this whole basket of technologies. So you hear a lot about this digital transformation. And we've always had this promise of the digital age and being able to deliver this sort of robot factory. But we still are trying to eke value out of each of those steps. But at the end of the day, every organization is, I believe, circling the drain at some point. And the only way they can stop that is through innovation and be more efficient and more competitive. And applying these tools are going to achieve that. If you can come up with the best widget, that's going to drive value. If you can do the same widget that everybody else has, but do it cheaper and better, that's the other strategy. So there's really two basic strategies. So you do it better and faster, or you do it do something new.
Yeah, I think, when it comes to using modern solutions and technology, especially in today's market, I think there's oftentimes that people are under the impression that technology tools that are used in business are simply and merely an audit trail. Now, we all know that that's not the case, and these solutions are supposed to, be implemented for some sort of a return on investment. If it doesn't make sense to change them, there's no point in changing, or there's no point in using that. But I mean, that nobody runs that way. There's never at any business probably in the world, there might be the odd few handful, but in most cases you're constantly trying to optimize your business. So why wouldn't anyone optimize their technology?
And we get overwhelmed, we get bombarded with these technologies, promising the sort of the this is your solution, and they may be a solution, but it's not a one-shot kind of deal. It's not like you implement it and you're done. There's usually a phase-in process and a continual evolution and a continual integration into your business processes and other technologies. Ideally, you've got solutions that can seamlessly integrate all those or cover all those major areas. But you also have to make the choice of which one. And I've said this over and over, the most basic non-technical thing you can do for your business is standardize and understand your current processes, whether it's pen and paper or whether it's the abacus or whether it's a very advanced ERP. You got to understand your process, and that's a key part of a successful business.
Murray, what are your thoughts?
I was going to there's a couple of things, and we'll get into a little bit more of a methodology with Stephen, because I think that it starts with the strategic plan, doesn't it? And I think when we kind of switch gears and go, how does a company kind of go about and down a path of digital transformation, we might want to kind of share a little bit about what the methodology works. But I want to throw it back to you, Sam. I think you've done a lot of presentations and knowledge share around digital transformation, and to just speak to a little bit more around digital transformation and really what it really means to businesses today.
Yeah, I mean, the way that I look at digital transformation is that it needs to make sense. And there's three important components that are involved in it: people, processes, and then the tool that you're going to use to deploy digital transformation. So you can't deploy digital transformation successfully with one or two out of the three components. All of them need to work together. Starting with processes, you need to know what kind of digital transformation you require, and you really can't do that if you don't know what your processes are. So it comes back to, when I spoke at the Supply Chain Expo there last week. Well, why, if you don't have your documents required and documented, you don't know what's going on, you might say, I need an ERP, or I need a CRM, or I need, better supply chain, I need better inventory management, whatever it might be. But when you might be actually shown, let's say, a bike or a Vespa, when in reality you actually need a cargo ship. So naturally, business owners will take and make the self-made assumption that a solution can't meet their demands, and it comes back to the transparency thing. So it always starts with documenting your processes, your requirements, your pains, what's making you lose money, and then quantifying it. So once you quantify that value, once you've taken your processes and you realize that you have, let's say, 15 people doing data entry, which I also refer to as it's an integration. Although it's not an actual program, it is a level of integration, and it isn't just naturally a person. So then you got to start thinking, well, quantifying the salaries of these people that you're paying to enter information from one system into another. It's not about eliminating jobs, but it's about, being efficient, being relevant, maybe reallocating those employees to things that are more prosperous for the business. For instance, better marketing, better sales, more operational staff, whatever it might be. And then after that, of course, you working with a tool. You find the tool that's going to fit your business needs, and there's obviously so many on the market, and it does take extensive evaluation. But people are the biggest component, I think, in this. All in all, people need to be competent enough to know what they need to document. People need to choose the right solution. People need to actually deploy the work, set up their inventory, set up everything in the system. But people also need to have time. People can be resistant to change, and people, in my opinion, always tend to hold a very, very, very large variable when it comes to choosing any sort of technology, because you're faced with emotion, you're faced with feelings, you're faced with biased opinions, or whatever it might be.
I think that's where the change management comes in, and I want to let Stephen talk about that a little bit. I think that just to, a couple other topics we want to make sure that we have time to get to. So, but I'll throw it to you in a second, Stephen, but I want you to talk about your PhD topic. We'll get there in a minute, as well as I want you to talk a little bit about the Alberta IoT. But before we get there, kind of back to Samantha's point around the importance of people, even though that I think we want to get talk a little bit about some of the technologies, but I want you to go back and talk about some of the methodology that one might go through, and using your expertise as a change management expert, and maybe kind of walk through a methodology a little bit more detail.
Sure. First of all, I love that idea of the people, the processes, and the tools. And I'm a visual guy, so there's always a triangle, right? And those three things need to be all in place. And that one piece, which is people, as much as you can objectively draw out a perfect plan, we're emotional, gooey, irrational beings, and which you can collectively call as an organizational culture. And that's not a bad thing. Culture and people are great, because if you can direct that passion and that positive culture of innovation and being positive, it can be like jet fuel for your organization and your strategic plans. On the other hand, if it's negative and critical and lacks integrity, it's the biggest anchor and has killed many very otherwise successful organizations. So the ADKAR model is very well known for change management. First is acknowledging that you have a problem or you need to change. So that's that innovation, and I would say we always need to change. But you brought up earlier about the strategic plan. So it all starts on why are we here? What are we trying to achieve? Are you a nonprofit and you just want to save the world? Or are you a profit agency and want to do other good things and you have all these objectives? Then you understand your processes, document and standardize your processes. Then you start looking at what are the tools, beyond the pen and paper and sticky notes, that can be more effective. You don't replace your processes. You don't replace your standards. You actually enhance them and make them far more effective and real time and faster and better communication. But the processes should not be shoehorned into a tool. Understand your processes, then choose the tool. So that's a very important part. And of course, you need to build buy-in as you make these changes in tools. They can be overwhelming. If you're a typewriter, a data entry clerk, and that job gets eliminated, well, then you have a huge opportunity to reallocate that. And so there's another horrible acronym that I like is BPAAS, Business Process as a Service. And so basically what that is all these innovations are creating efficiencies, and we're able to do the same thing with less resources, or we're able to have with the same resources, we have a capacity to do so much more. So tools like ERP systems, like CRMs, customer relationship management, enterprise planning tools, those are really help enable and accelerate change. But the change is really foundational is the people, the processes, and then the tools that continue to evolve. We've seen back in the early 2000s, a lot of people sort of gone on the bandwagon and put in a big ERP system. And they got it in and then, all right, we're done. And really, they didn't realize any value. Some ended up going out of business because they couldn't handle the change. But it's don't expect the skies to open up and gold to fall down. You need to realize there's a phase-in process, and it's usually around phase 2 and 3 where you start extracting the value after it's been implemented, that you start to see more competitiveness and efficiency of your systems.
And I think that the systems have most certainly changed too throughout the years, right? I mean, when you talk about the early 2000s and, even the late 10 years ago, even, I guess, even software has always been sort of considered, let's say, more of an audit trail, right? So when we look at technology today and think about the idea of self-checkouts, right? The thought probably of that didn't cross anybody's mind, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, and now it's something that's very much alive. It enables you as a customer to be self-sufficient, and it helps in so many different ways, right? But it's really, I think, about captivating all of that technology and running with it, and always and understanding that this is always going to be a work in progress. This isn't going to, like you said, be something you just drop in and then run with it, right? And I think the other aspect of that is, and this is again what I spoke around at the Supply Chain Expo last week, is you have to look at the big picture. If you have an inventory problem, don't go buy an inventory system. If you have a manufacturing problem, don't just go buy a manufacturing system. And the reason is there's too many aspects of each component of a business that touches on so many other things. And I have the slide available, but inventory touches accounting, touches manufacturing, touches estimating, touches CRM, touches quoting. It touches so many aspects of a business. So looking for just a sole fix for that one problem is also going to be a really big hit to your business.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I love the Stephen, what you talk about is just absolutely music to our ears when you mentioned, I think you use some of the language that I use all the time, is that the technology is not something you just drop in and you press a button and it's magic. Continuous improvement is one of the things I talk about often. It's one of our core values as a company, and it's what it means is exactly what you mentioned, is it's not the dropping in that'll give you the value. That might get you to the level playing field, but then it's the phase 2 and the phase 3s is, how can we leverage this to create that competitive advantage? Do you have any, I always want to know, I always like to go to examples, but do you have any examples that come to mind of companies leveraging some advanced technologies? And this may start to get into, I want to, maybe talk a little bit about Alberta IoT, but maybe before we get to that specifically, are there some examples that you wanted that come to mind where you go, this is an example of where they've gotten their space system together, but then they were able to leverage some advanced technologies to create some real business value?
Well, I'll tell you a personal one. I got involved with an organization as a change manager, and we found they had previously implemented an ERP system, and it was really just sort of dropped in, and it was only basically it was transactional. It was providing no level of insight beyond what people intuitively knew, right? Oh, our stock is down, we better make more of it. It was not adding any value. So we took it to space 2. And how I describe it is we were driving a car and we had to clean off the windshield because we couldn't see anything. And so once the windshield's clear, we could actually let the system see and then what it did, it started recognizing that we had invoices, we had sales orders, it triggered when we should order our raw materials to initiate a work order in order to feed our inventory levels that we had set into place. So there was a whole continuous flow. So instead of me at the beginning, I was trying to set these standards. As soon as I was trying to set these standards, I was doing a big Excel exercise every week trying to set them. Once we set them, we could actually focus our interests on strategic planning, innovation, product development stuff. That was the reallocation of our time and effort because the system was already in place. We just had to tweak it. And there were times where, oh my gosh, our inventory, we had a back order. What happened? Well, that's a great opportunity to drill down and ask you've heard of the 5 whys? Why did that happen? And why? And then why? And why? And you get down to the core reason, and then we make some adjustments in the system. But we're not in the business of inventory. We're in the business of delivering products. This is the necessary connection to that. So that's the best example I have. It's very real.
So we've got getting about 10 minutes left, and we want to make sure to get to your PhD, and we'll get into that a bit. But I want you to
call you Dr. Digital from now on.
I had a session with Dr. Growth last week, and it's a completely different person. But anyway, I like the doctor title. Tell us a little bit about Alberta IoT and so you talked about the 4.0 technologies. And so talk a little bit about Alberta IoT and some of the examples, and then maybe explain a couple of technical terms and some of the unique things that you might get to in your role as chair of the Center of Excellence there, please.
So first of all, the way I visualize Internet of Things is this umbrella of technologies, as I mentioned. IoT is one of the core ones, but they also include robots, they include digital twin, AI, blockchain. There's a whole bunch of these things under that umbrella. IoT in particular is basically how I try to explain it. I explained it to my wife, who it's sort of gives me a deer in the headlights look every time I say it. So I tried to explain it in a very simple way. And basically, it's you have a device that is a dumb device, and you put sensors in that device, whatever it is. I use the example of a beer glass. You want to put a sensor in a beer glass that tells you how full your beer is. Then you communicate that data in some format, whether it's Bluetooth, satellites, we're hearing about 5G or SIM cards, and often it'll go into a cloud that can be accessed and analyzed. And then a decision can be made. Now, in my very pragmatic, or maybe it's just because I'm thirsty, beer glass example, if I'm at a pub and my beer glass gets empty, there's maybe that sensor will tell the waitress that it's empty and she'll come with a new one and I'll have another one. So that, is there a business case for that? I'm not even suggesting there is. Maybe that's, but it's that connection and understanding that. So at the association where there is business value, and they often call it industrial Internet of Things, is connecting rolling assets, flowing assets. They connect processes, industrial processes from pumps and motors and everything else that connect for their business process. And it starts off as basically remote monitoring. So I don't have to go up to the tank and say, oh, it's empty or it's full. I can be in my office and say the tank's full. And then I may make a decision, go fill it or empty it. Now, over time, you can evolve that remote monitoring to put some intelligence into that. When it hits at a certain level, that'll be a trigger point to order the supplier to refill it. So you see the potential where this is. At the Alberta Internet of Things Association, we're trying to represent that industry, all the companies, and create this center of excellence where we're trying to track people who are researchers in the field, the leading edge companies around the world to come to Alberta and try and support them in research and develop this as a body of work where everybody wins. We don't do IoT stuff. We help support the industry. We had some big players recently come in from Microsoft to the CIO, Mark from PCL is on. So you have a big construction company who are connecting IoT devices into their construction. Pipelines in terms of monitoring flow remotely, leak detection, all these kind of things are huge advancements of efficiency in industry.
One of our customers happens to use IoT sensors as well in that particular way in leak detection. So they work with a lot of water towers and they have IoT sensors set up in these water towers. And assuming a threshold is hit to identify a leak, it's a call to action. It goes through the internet, of course, and notifies the person that's responsible or the receiver that there is a leak at this, particular water tower or whatever. And they have that sort of proactive versus reactive mentality. But then the other way you can look at it, though, too, is, for instance, if you have, like you said, an industrial component, whether it's a battery or something on a product, something that can wear and tear, and you put one of these sensors on it, and the battery, let's say its life is 5 years, customer places an order, buys that battery, and then once the battery starts going to, let's say, a 15-20% capacity left, you can send an email alert through your system to that particular customer who's purchased that particular item because it's serialized anyways, and say, hey, your battery's probably going to die in the next 6 months or so. Maybe you should think about ordering one, right? So that's how you can use it to upsell as well.
And it's happened. We're seeing this everywhere. People think that it's something else, it's something new. There's certain technologies like 5G is going to accelerate that communication, but you have Bluetooth, or you just have hardwired in your car. You have a sensor in your gas tank that says you have 10 kilometers left. It's telling you you're going to be empty. So you've closed that loop from an IoT. Your pressure sensors. We have fridges now that say, hey, you got your food in there. You can connect your fridge door is open. All these things, but where it's really value when we're talking about business and industrial processes that reduce waste and actually find where Alberta is more competitive. And we're not talking just competitive in oil and gas. We're talking about the new generation of a new economy of connecting processes from insurance to oil and gas.
Yeah, and throughout the supply chain, or you think about or even a retail example. I heard an excellent example from Walmart of leveraging blockchain technology and how they're pushing it to their trading partners. And it's good to kind of, there's a lot of these buzzwords out there, and a lot of these technologies there, but you have to have what's the practical example?
Sorry to interrupt. You had a great example there,
Yeah.
Walmart. People think it's a grocery store. It's an IT company.
Sure.
And they have RFID tags on every product that comes in, and it's all connected. And there's an uber amount of technology that drives their product and inventory levels. So their inventory is as low as possible in order to reduce waste, but they always have it on hand. They found that sweet spot that other places, and they've outcompeted many other competitors in that field.
It's great. You hear the examples, but then how do you kind of take some of those and then drive them to the small mid-sized business? And I think there's some excellent strategies that we can think of today. This isn't really pie in the sky stuff. Mm-hmm. So we got about 5 minutes left. Talk about your PhD and tell us about the topic and where you're at with that, and share some thoughts on that if you don't mind, please.
Sure. Well, I started to really get interested in this topic. And so I took a couple of classes and got really excited and got connected with my professor at the U of A, Dr. Rafiq Ahmad, in Industry 4.0, technologies, lean manufacturing. And so what my interest is in terms of competitive businesses, like I was always intrigued. I was I think Elon Musk is amazing. Like, wow, like what he's been able to do and push the envelope for everything. But he's got so much money, he can build a robot factory and do all this really cool stuff. And he can actually risk being on the bleeding edge of innovation. Whereas a small businesses, and that's the focus of what I want to research, how does a small and medium-sized business get into the game of technology and IoT? If you run I use the example of a muffler shop, is that just not even within, is there an opportunity there? And if we sat around, we could probably think of ways. And how do we actually make him or her muffler shop more competitive? And of course, we use the same process that we talked about before, which is, what are your processes? What are your standards? How do you make that more efficient? How do you move from analog pen and paper sticky notes to a digital process? And if you're aware and you go to different places, whether it's a lube shop or other places, you can see how that's starting to connect. You used to have the membership cards, or you have the scanning, RFID tags, all this stuff. How does a small and medium-sized business leverage these technologies and be competitive without being a Tesla and have millions and billions of dollars at will? And so that's because they're subject to things like business cases and return on investment and payback period. They can't afford to risk their capital or chase shiny objects that aren't going to deliver.
It comes back, I think, down to that return on investment aspect, right? Because you can't, if you're buying something too big or too small, is going to be just as detrimental to your business as doing nothing at all. So if you buy, let's say, a Ferrari, and all you need to use is the radio, well, why'd you buy a Ferrari then, right? Or if, you need a bike, or, you need to always centralize that. You need to find a system or a solution that's going to streamline your business correctly, but it starts with one thing. When it comes to adding value, creating value, and reducing waste, you have to start with centralizing your data in one location, whether that's an ERP system, whether it's QuickBooks and Excel because you just started your own company, whatever it is, you need to centralize that information. You need to have it in one platform. And like we all mentioned, starting phase 2, phase 3, that's when you start getting into technologies. And it's up to partners like us, or people like yourself, Steve, to be acting as trusted advisors for these businesses, because honestly, if someone sells mufflers, they probably have no idea what their capabilities are as far as, using technology. So I think it's really important to have a trusted advisor that you can really work with and build out your business.
And if somebody came to me and asked for advice on an ERP system, I'd say I'd first go through what is your processes? Mm-hmm. What are your standards around those processes? How do we digitize that and standardize that and quantify that? And then we find a tool that can capture that data.
After you've documented the requirements.
That's phase 1 right there.
And that's what we do too. So we don't do anything different. If someone calls me and says, I want a product demo, I said, well, you're not going to get one until I know what your product, your requirements are. So.
And we know this from the Japanese started this in 1940s, right? The late 40s, when we didn't have the technology we had today, but they still standardize, they quantify. Now we just have better, faster, stronger, cooler tools, but the principles of lean are still there. And
well, so we're going to have to wrap up here, and I look forward, Stephen. We will certainly probably have hopefully more podcasts and share some more customer stories, and really look forward to the completion of your PhD, and that's near and dear to our hearts around the roadway for small, medium-sized businesses to leverage some of these technologies. So thanks for hanging out with us here today, and we look forward to more for sure, some more kind of examples of stuff that we can work on. Any other closing thoughts, Sam or Stephen?
I always like to say, look at big picture. So that's my my closing thought, and always find a trusted advisor to help you through this journey if you don't know how to do it yourself.
Yeah, I would just say that, you know what, think of it as a journey in a relationship. Don't think of it as this massive, you got to jump into the lake. You can slowly work your way in, but you need to be thoughtful. And what is the first thing first, and work your way through that.
Yeah.
There are going to be some key decision points, but you don't have to wait until you're way behind the 8 ball. You can start thinking about this.
Yeah, good.
Awesome.
All right. Well, thanks a lot. We'll catch you.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.